Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month.
Hello, and welcome to today's virtual Commonwealth Club program. I'm Julie Latta, Global Community Affairs Manager at Applied Materials. Through the Applied Materials Foundation's Generation Girl initiative, we are dedicated to inspiring girls to pursue their dreams and supporting the next generation of diverse women leaders. We are delighted to be a part of today's special program with Misty Copeland, author of The Wind at My Back, Resilience, Grace, and Other Gifts from My Mentor, Raven Wilkinson. In 2015, Misty made history and changed the dance world forever when she became the first African-American female principal dancer at the American Ballet Theater. Mentors play such significant roles in our lives, and Misty attributes many of her achievements would not have been possible without the unwavering support from one of her ballet mentors, Raven Wilkinson. We are eager to hear more from Misty about Raven Wilkinson's contributions and the role that mentorship played in her life, both personally and professionally. Moderating our conversation is Mina Kim, host of Forum on KQED-FM. Please join me in welcoming Misty and Mina.
Thank you, Julie. It is such an honor to be here, and I am so delighted to get to talk with Misty Copeland, and also audience members. It's not just me who gets to talk with Misty Copeland. You can submit questions for Misty in the YouTube text chat during our conversation. But Misty, congratulations on the book. It was such a lovely tribute to Raven Wilkinson, and also to intertwine her story with your incredible story as well. So I guess let me just start by asking you, who was Raven Wilkinson?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor, and I think I say this with every book that I write, but this one is my most proud accomplishment, of all the books that I've written, and that's because of what Raven means to me. Raven Wilkinson was the first Black ballerina to join a mainstream, major, elite touring classical company, really one of the first American ballet companies that came to America, I believe, in the 30s, the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. She joined the company in 1955, and she was the first and only Black woman to dance there. She became a soloist very shortly after joining, which was unheard of for Black women in the ballet field. She endured so much adversity and hardship throughout her career, having her life threatened whenever the company would tour through the South, experiencing the KKK, incredible stories, them coming onto the stage in the theater, stopping the tour bus, looking for the Black dancer and really threatening her life. It derailed her career for a little while, and eventually she ended up moving to Amsterdam and dancing with the Dutch National Ballet for about 10 years before returning to New York City. But she never did dance again in America in a classical ballet company because no white company would take her. She went into performing with the New York State Opera, where she sang and acted and danced a little bit. But she is a pioneer in the classical ballet world and became a close mentor and friend of mine over the last, about 10 years or so.
Yeah, a close mentor and friend of yours, but you sort of happened upon her, right? You happened to learn about her by watching a documentary. Can you tell us how you found out about her?
Yeah, it was really unbelievable. I've spent the majority of my career, at least the first 10 years or so, not really knowing my history as a Black person, as a Black woman in classical ballet. And I was searching for this sense of belonging and acceptance, and where is my history within this world? And there's just not a lot of documentation of Black women's contributions to this art form. So I was always looking for a way to learn more. So I happened to be watching a documentary on the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, wanting to learn more about the history of this art form. And I don't know, an hour and a half or so into this documentary, this elegant Black woman appeared on the screen. And it was the first time that I even became aware that there was a Black woman in that company. I was stunned. I was angry that I didn't know her story, but I also felt like she gave me this second wind in a time when I felt like I was at a standstill within my career. And knowing that there had been someone who had walked the same path as me gave me a different sense of purpose, and made me feel as though it was my responsibility to do everything that she didn't have the opportunity to do. And it's really incredible that after learning of her and feeling that I needed to share her story on every platform that I had, and then eventually finding out that she was still alive, and she actually lived a block away from me in New York City.
Right. I mean, that's incredible. And that she knew about you. She had actually been watching you well before you found out about her.
Yeah, that was one of the more remarkable things. I mean, of course, the fact that we probably had passed each other on the street a number of times and never knew it. But meeting her and finding out that, I'm expecting for her to just be learning about me and to be meeting me for the first time. And the first thing she says to me is, I've followed your career since you were 15 years old. And I come to, most of your performances that I have like throughout your professional career. That was just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that moment of seeing her in that company and feeling a certain sense of recognition, which I think can mean so many things. But you also say that it was at a certain time in your life where you really needed to discover someone like Raven. What were you going through at that time?
I spent the first decade of my career, the only Black woman at American Ballet Theater, in a company of between 80 and 90 dancers, within that time. And, it was a sense of just feeling isolated and feeling like maybe this is not the place for me, the place where I can truly thrive. And it, I had been a soloist, I think, for 3 years when I learned of Raven. And though I'd made it to soloist, and I was only the second Black woman to ever reach that position in the companies, I think then like 70-year history or something like that. And I just felt like maybe that was as far as I could go. There'd never been a Black woman to reach the rank of principal dancer, and I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't being given opportunity, and I was often overlooked. I mean, there were so many instances where I literally was told, what I would ask about, certain roles and why I wasn't cast in them when my other soloists in the company were. And it was literally, oh, sorry, we overlooked you. And I feel like that's the story for a lot of minorities, a lot of Black people, where you feel that though you stand out, you're not seen or heard. And I felt that I needed someone who understood my journey and my path to help guide me in a way. And a lot of the mentors I had at that point were incredible Black women who had done so much for me and inspired me and nurtured me, but were not a part of the ballet world. They were successful in their own right and in different fields. But Raven was literally the perfect person that I needed to show me how to look at my career in a different way. She was so hopeful and so present and so balanced, and had incredible empathy after all that she has had endured throughout her career.
Yeah. She passed in 2018. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that, for all the incredible things you learned from her throughout your relationship with her, I was also struck by how it also made you realize how little had changed for Black ballerinas, even from the time that she was dancing to the time that you were dancing. So let's go back actually a little bit to talk about your arc as well, and how it reflected to you that there was still a long way to go. So when were you first introduced to ballet?
I had, I guess, an unusual path into the ballet world. I was 13 years old when I really kind of stumbled upon it. I mean, I really stumbled upon dance in general. I was never a part of any like structured classes. I never took a dance class in my life, but I loved movement. It was something that I was doing in the privacy of my home because I was so shy and so introverted, and music and dance became this escape for me. I had a very chaotic childhood. I was one of 6 children in a single parent home, a lot of moving around and changing schools, and sometimes not even having a roof over our heads. I mean, we were living in a motel actually at the time when I discovered ballet. But the first form of dance that I did was joining the drill team at my middle school in Southern California. For some reason, I had no confidence in when it came to anything in my life. And for some reason, I felt that I should audition for the position of captain of this drill team when I had no experience. And I did, and they made me captain. And it was from there that the coach said, you have a lot of potential, and I think you should take these free ballet classes that are being offered at the Boys and Girls Clubs in the Boys and Girls Club in San Pedro, California. So I was already a member. My mom had me and my siblings there, to have a safe place for us to go after school. And that's when I was introduced to my first ballet teacher, who was teaching this ballet class on a basketball court in the gym at the Boys and Girls Club, looking for more diverse students to give scholarships to bring into her school. And she said from the first class that she taught me that she knew that I was a prodigy. Eventually, she invited me to live with her and her family so that I could really focus and catch up since I started so late, because most professionals will go off to join companies between the ages of 16 and 19. And I was already 13. So I had a lot of catching up to do. I ended up training for 4 years before I moved to New York City and joined American Ballet Theater.
Yeah. You talked about how just music just made sense in your body, that doing ballet just felt so natural and organic. And I'm curious what you feel like ballet gave you, especially as you describe the backdrop of your life at that time.
Ballet gave me everything I think I was searching for as a child. It gave me stability and consistency. It made me feel safe. Just the environment of being in a studio where, you're literally like naked. You're vulnerable. You're literally just wearing tights and a leotard. But you're in this environment where I just felt so at ease. I felt like my body could relax, like all of the tension that I always had, just again, from the environment that I grew up in, I could let go. And I felt beautiful for the first time in my life. I felt like I was good at something. I was being told I was good at something. There was something that was just mine. I didn't have to share it with my 5 siblings. It was really difficult for my mother to put in the time and give attention to each one of us when there were 6 of us and she was working many jobs. And it gave me confidence. It showed me what perseverance and strength and grace, all of these things that like I understand the power of dance and the power of art, which is why I've started my own foundation with a similar program to the one I came up in.
Yeah, the description of it giving you this sense of power was a very powerful thing to read, because the irony is, once you really committed yourself to it, the gatekeepers of the ballet world actually started to chip away, kept trying to chip away at something that gave you power. So it had this like dual effect on you. Yeah. I remember even when you were describing like being the Swan Queen in Swan Lake, and just the way that they ask you to dust yourself with white powder and things like that, to be able to sort of blend in and follow the idea that this is really an art form for white dancers. Just those kinds of things are just the tip of the iceberg of all the kinds of messaging that the ballet world would give you. First, do you want to talk a little bit about getting the role of the Swan Queen in Swan Lake, what that means? Because I think it really does, in so many ways, encapsulate all of the pressures, expectations that you were experiencing, while also trying to be and own that space of power that ballet gives you.
Yeah. So Swan Lake is really the most iconic ballets in the repertoire, and for a principal ballerina, that's really that's the top. That's what most dancers aim for. And even if you are a principal dancer, it doesn't guarantee that you will ever perform that role. I know principal dancers that have danced at ABT that never even had the opportunity to do that role. It's also one of a category of classical works that is called the Ballet Blanc, which translates into white ballets. It's probably one of the most recognizable from that genre. It's when the second act of the ballet is typically characters that are spirits or sylphs, otherworldly, not alive, or not human. So they will powder their skin to take away the shine, so that they don't look human. But for generations and generations, Black women have not been cast in the second acts of these Ballet Blanc ballets, period, let alone even be considered to do the lead, the white swan, the Swan Queen, the dual role of Odette Odile, which is the white and the black swan. And so, I write it in the book, and the wind at my back, that there is this long kind of generational trauma that is connected, this Black ballerina generational trauma that I think is so connected to Swan Lake in particular. So that's not even a role I allowed myself to dream of doing. Joining the company, Swan Lake was the first ballet that I performed as a corps de ballet member with ABT when I was 19 years old. And I remember overhearing, a friend of mine, a colleague in the company, overhearing a very important person in the company who was a part of the artistic staff saying that I should not be allowed to perform in the second act because I will ruin the aesthetic. I'll ruin the line, this unison of white dancers dancing in white tulle. And when the company filmed the ballet for it's actually a video you can purchase today. I was not a part of the second act of any of those parts of the ballet because of the color of my skin. So there's a long history connected to that. So when I don't know, it must have been 14 or 15 years after I joined the company, which is a very late age to be given some of your first principal roles. If you're not a principal dancer by that point, it's most likely is not going to happen. So when I was told that I would be learning the role of Odette Odile at 32 years old, my mind was blown. I literally had to kind of reassess, like change the way I thought about this ballet. And I mean, I should have gone to therapy. I should have gone to therapy strictly for Swan Lake, and I didn't because there was so much change in my mindset that needed to happen to allow me to really feel confident and that I should be performing that role. So there was a lot of baggage that came with it.
Yeah, you write about how you kept questioning whether you were worthy of it. And then at the same time, putting the pressure on yourself that if you didn't do it well, that you would make it harder for other Black ballerinas to be given that role. And that is just an incredible amount of pressure to carry. It can be such a burden to carry. But I was so struck by something that you said in the introduction, which is that what you learned from Raven was that when I enter, the whole race enters with me, that it's not just a burden or pressure, but it offers the promise of possibility. And I just was wondering, how did Raven teach you that? And how did you come to internalize that so that you could see it as an opportunity as opposed to just something tremendous to carry?
Yeah, it took me, having a lot of, I guess you could say Raven was my therapist. It took me having a lot of conversations with her. Raven was such an incredible, I guess you can call her teacher, but not your typical teacher, where, she'd sit down and have these life lessons that she was, that were so clearly being told. But it was through these stories or just, the way that she treated people that allowed me to see that even with everything she experienced throughout her career, she still had such a love and respect for the art form and for the people in it as well. That, she was a part of something that was so much bigger than her. And that she had a responsibility every time she went on stage, and that it wasn't just a responsibility, but a privilege to be able to do what we do, to be able to do something that, that you're passionate about. And that, there could be one person in the audience that you're affecting and that you're changing their lives. And it really allowed me to kind of step back and think about these opportunities in different ways. How many people can say that they had the opportunity to perform the Swan Queen? And this was my shot to go out there, enjoy myself. That was one of the big things that she would always say is, that you're doing this because you love it. And you want the audience to feel that, that it's coming from a true and natural and genuine place. But she just changed the way that I looked at things. It's of course like a serious thing when you're on stage and you work your whole life to do these roles, but at the same time, it's just ballet.
Well, I was struck by how she would talk about how ballet itself, the core of ballet, is not racist, that it's not designed to be exclusive, that it's the gatekeepers who make it that way. And did you question that too as you got into it and saw the lack of representation? Initially, you were like, that's okay. Like that my love of this is so powerful that it overcame whatever concerns you had about the lack of representation of Black dancers in it. But the way that she talks about how it's not racist, the core of it is not racist. What did she mean by that? That the core of it is racist?
Yeah, if you think back to, the fact that this art form was created, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and the technique has not changed. We're literally still doing the exact same technique, that our ancestors were doing. It's such a pure technique and art at its core, like you were saying, that it's not had to change in that way. Of course, the stories that we're telling and the body types that have evolved because of cross training and the physicality of things, or the way that we're eating and taking care of our body, has changed and shifted. But the technique does not discriminate against different body types. All body types can do this art form, and it creates the most incredible outcome. And it's even more beautiful when it's done on different body types and people from different backgrounds. But
Yes.
It's so clearly the structure, the institutions that have kept people of color out of it. It's not the technique that's saying these certain body types can't do it. It's the people involved, and it's these institutions that have been built with a certain aesthetic in mind, and it's really made people convinced people that ballet dancers look a certain way, which just perpetuates the same, discrimination and exclusion and racism.
To the point that there were times when people suggested that you dance in a different lane, right? Dance a different type of dance.
Yeah, it happened. It happened for both Raven and I. I mean, it's pretty awful. Just being Black, being African American, to be told that you should be doing African dance when that's not at all something that either of us trained in. But a lot of Black dancers are, steered towards more modern dance because the stereotype is that Black people have flat feet, and it's more suitable when you're not in a point shoe and you don't have to articulate your feet. That ballet is something that takes more skill than a Black person has, intelligence that a Black person doesn't have. And so we're often told that we'll find more success if we try jazz, hip hop, or African dance, modern dance, not classical.
Yeah, we have questions coming in from the audience, and one of them is there a role or performance that is still on your bucket list?
Oh my goodness. I've done so much in my 20 plus year career at ABT. And I'm trying to think about, I think it's that there's certain roles that I haven't done enough that I want more time, more of an opportunity to do. And Manon being one of them, these more really powerful story ballets where it's just a lot of meaty acting, and it's so difficult. I mean, it's like this in life, you have a young body and you physically can do so much, but you don't have the life experiences. You don't have those reps of doing something and feeling comfortable in it. So it's like a double-edged sword. I feel that tackling these meaty acting roles, like I'm ready and I have all the life experience, but my body's not what it used to be.
Well, that is actually another thing I wanted to talk with you about. So we were talking about Swan Lake earlier, and you were talking about how in the book, it requires almost its own training, right? Because you have to maneuver your arms like wings and so on. And there's also so much to ballet that I came to appreciate in reading your memoir, of the character portrayal, the acting. And so I wonder how you approach how you portray characters, just artistically, how you interpret roles, because I do feel like, given that the techniques are, as you say, they've gone back forever, and what constitutes doing those correctly is one thing, but where the ballerina really comes in is the way that they interpret and what they bring to those incredible moves. I'm just wondering how you approach that part of it.
Yeah. It's taken a lot of time and a lot of focus, and for me to have like an open mind and an open heart and be open to getting guidance. And I worked with a theater coach probably from early-ish on in my career, because I think I understood the importance of the storytelling aspect of what we do, that it's not just technical feats. The younger that the dancers are and come into companies, the more that you start to see things change, where technically they are able to accomplish far more than we ever could. But then, the focus becomes too much on the tricks and the flexibility and all of these things. And I think I've always had an understanding of the power of storytelling, because there was that was my way of expression. It wasn't just about me finding ballet and it being fun and me trying to get my leg the highest, but it truly was an escape from my life. And it was through the storytelling, it was through the artistic aspect of ballet. I guess that's why I felt so comfortable in wanting to reach out to a theater coach and really focus on the storytelling aspect of it. But it's doing research. It's I guess like any actor would research a role. It's understanding what part of the world the ballet takes place in. It's understanding all of the surrounding characters and how you relate to them. It's digging deep, because, we're not able to use our voice and there's no dialogue, there are no words. This is all through, a technique that probably the majority of the people in the audience don't know. So how do you tell a story through a language that people in the audience might not know? It's really important always has been really important for me to be as human and grounded in these roles, even if they are so fantastical, where I'm playing a princess or a firebird or a swan, that it's something that the audience can connect to and relate to. So it's reading books, it's doing research on the internet, but really taking the time to know details, so that there's never a moment when you're on stage and there's not dance steps and you don't know what to do with yourself.
Such an incredible amount of discipline that ballet requires on so many different levels. And we have another audience question. Is there anything you wish you had known or done differently when you started at the American Ballet Theater?
I wished I would have been more confident in pushing myself in terms of like the conversations I was having with my artistic director, like having more agency over my career, which is so difficult for young people when they're coming into a professional, the professional workforce or, whatever it is, but it's also not something that's really taught to us, especially as dancers. We're often just told to, be quiet, feel fortunate that you're even in this space and you have this opportunity, and not to advocate for yourself. And I wished I would have felt comfortable doing that earlier on. I think it would have saved me a lot of hardship. It would have made me, know how to, what the things I needed to work on in order to improve and get certain roles, and just be a more confident woman in the world.
But as you describe the systems and structures of ballet, there's such a power dynamic. I think you talked about how determining who gets a solo in a performance is like as secretive as determining who the next pope will be. Right? It's just this really opaque process.
It's a subjective art form. But it's also, it's the artistic director's preference, and there's so much of it that you can't control. And I feel like a lot of times, they don't want to ever make clear promises, because you never know how a dancer might change or injury and the expectations that are set. So there's just so much fuzziness when it comes to that aspect of the ballet world.
Yeah. Well, this audience member wants to know what is the best piece of advice, either professional or personal, that you've received, and who was it from?
Yeah, I received so much incredible advice. It's hard to say, just one person. I know Susan Jaffe, who was a principal dancer with American Ballet Theater, and is taking over as artistic director next year, which is so exciting. But she was someone that was always saying, like, to whenever I'd be distracted by the reviews or critics or blogs or whatever it is, people writing about me on the internet, and to not let other people's words define you, and that you really have the power to take what you want from people. But also Prince was another one, the musician, and I worked with him for some time, and he definitely changed the way that I looked at myself as being the only, and feeling isolated, in a company, and kind of having this negative outlook on that. And he was like, do you know how incredible it is to be different and to be unique and to be the only? There's so much power in that. People are looking at you. Do you know how many people want that focus? And I was like, like I never looked at it in that way. And that definitely helped for me to understand and kind of change my perception of myself and the power I did hold by being the only and being the first.
Yeah, there are so many moments where the framing, a shift in that can create a kind of paradigm shift.
Yeah, right.
Which you described through this process, right? Of carrying so much with you. I want to ask you about the title of your book, and if you could just share that, the inspiration for the title, because it's so lovely.
Thank you. So the title is The Wind at My Back. Throughout the time that I knew Raven personally, every performance, and she never missed a performance, that she would either be there at the show. She'd see me afterwards. We'd talk on the phone, or she would leave a voicemail for me. And it was always this long voicemail about how excited she was to see me dance and how she was thinking of me. But she would always end the message or the conversation with, when you're on the stage, let me be the wind at your back. And it was it just meant so much to me, because it was as if, there was a passing of the torch, and I, again, was, performing these roles that she never got an opportunity to be. And it was like she was there pushing me forward. But it also made me think about not just Raven, but all of the incredible Black women who had paved the way for me to be there. It was like all of them are the wind at my back. So, those words are so powerful. And to this day, I still have voicemail saved on my phone from her saying that to me.
Yeah, let me be the wind at your back. I thought it was cute that she wasn't always the easiest person to reach, because you would have to call her.
Oh my gosh. It was terrible. She didn't even have call waiting. She didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have a computer or the internet, like nothing. And then she didn't even have call waiting. So like, you just, I can't even think of the last time I experienced that, where you're just like calling and it's just like, beep, beep, beep. Like, oh my God, Raven. And she could talk. So she'd be on the other line for hours with her friends, and you're like trying to get a hold of her.
So funny. It's good that's why it's good that you saved those voicemails. So just in case you couldn't reach her, she didn't have to be home. But, a lot of people, they hope to find mentors, or they hope to be a really effective mentor, but it can be really hard to create that relationship, to have it be truly consistent and meaningful. And I am curious what you learned from your relationship with Raven about what makes mentoring relationships successful, impactful.
Yeah. I think it's really important to be there in critical times. I've been mentoring young dancers for many, many years now. And, you know, of course it's about consistency and being available and being there, but it's not always realistic. But I think it's important um, to be there in those times of need, in those really critical times. And that's the power of mentorship, and having mentors in your life is being able to rely on someone when you don't have the strength or the confidence to do it on your own, to be able to lean on someone that can lift you up or be your backbone in those times when you just can't do it on your own. And that's what Raven was for me. You know, if I needed her, she was there.
Yeah. Yeah. We have another question here. You offer very personal stories about the company's system, diversity, etc. What do you hope can or will change in the dance world in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, I've seen a lot of change in the past 3 years, which you know, I never imagined in my time as a professional that I would see firsthand. But you know, I hope to continue to see more diversity in terms of the choreographers, the composers of music, the conductors that are on the stage and with these companies, because it does change the way that these stories are told. I mean, as well as bringing more diversity in terms of the stories we're telling, that they can reflect America, they can reflect the world, that we're not just telling these old early 1900s, 1800s stories that were written by white European men, that we can't connect to those stories like a lot of people in this day and age. And I think it's important that we just continue to evolve, to continue to make ballet more inclusive, and just really be able to see a reflection of the world.
Yeah, it is interesting when you think about the types of stories that are told, and it matters so much who is telling them and what experiences are reflected in those types of stories.
Right.
Another audience member wants to know, how did you manage to maintain your creativity and passion during COVID when performances were canceled or put on hold?
Yeah. I found them in different ways. You know, I actually haven't been on stage performing ballet since December of 2019. Because of COVID, and then I had my baby, and I'm still making my way back to the studio. But I found different outlets, whether it was through starting my production company, Life in Motion Productions, which, it's a way for me to get dance to more people. And what better way to do that than through film and through television? And I think that the world realized that and learned that through COVID, the power of video, the power of YouTube, the power of, these streaming services, and how we can bring art to those spaces. And now that the world is back up and running, like, we still need to take advantage of those opportunities, because so many people that may not have the financial means to go to a theater, the Metropolitan Opera House, should be able to tune in and see art on their screen. So I have a ton of projects in the works through my production company that I had been working on through the pandemic that kept me creative. I actually made a short film that I produced through Life in Motion Productions, and I'm also starring in. It's called Flower, and it was filmed in Oakland, California, and really focused on that community, and using dance and art, ballet, to shine a light on the homelessness crisis in Northern California, gentrification and redlining. So I found lots of artistic ways to stay motivated.
Yeah, we have gone through a lot. You've touched on all the things that we've gone through in the last few years. And I wonder how much you have drawn upon the lessons you learned through ballet as you've also thought about bringing Jackson into the world and into this world, because you also talk very poignantly about feeling overwhelmed by all the things that were laid bare in the last 6 years, at least, I would say, or more, but especially in the last few. How do you see those parallels? How do you see those intersections between being a mom and being a dancer?
Yeah, it's made me, realize just the importance of being present and being open and ready to impart all that I've learned, from my own experiences, from Raven's experiences, the stories that she's told, to be able to best prepare my son for the world he's entering into. And I must say, like, I'm very thankful and grateful to my own mother for preparing me in a way, as a biracial girl, entering into the world, that she made it very clear that you are a Black woman. That's how you are going to be viewed and treated by society, by the world. It doesn't matter how much Black you have in you. And that's something that I think has prepared me for bringing a Black son into the world, that I want to prepare him in the best way I can, to be comfortable in his skin and also know what to expect when, in different circumstances and situations.
We actually have a related question I'm seeing from the audience. You recently became a mother. What has surprised you the most?
Oh my goodness. All of the, so many girlfriends of mine are just people that I've met along the way when I was pregnant that were just kind of preparing me for all of the hard things, the difficult things. And, it's kind of like, this is overwhelming and terrifying, hearing all of the, like, this is what's going to happen, and this is how you're going to feel, and you're not going to get any sleep, and, you're not going to be able to find a ballot, like all of these things. And I think I've found so much joy in those things. Like, this is all a part of it. This is like the beauty of creating a human being, of raising a person and a child. And I feel that this is the time. And I mean, I'm 40 years old. Me and my husband just, I think, feel really ready. And I would recommend to parents out there that having children at a later age is pretty awesome.
So when do you get back on stage? You said you have not been for a while for so many reasons, plus at Jackson, and that certainly also does a number on our bodies.
So I am aiming to be back in my first performances with American Ballet Theater in the fall, winter of 2023. So I am taking my time, but I want to spend this precious time with my son, and I also want to be as physically and mentally focused and prepared to get back on stage with this new body that I'm working with.
And so, what does that look like for you in terms of the progression?
In terms of like getting back into training.
Yeah, getting back, okay. Right, exactly.
And this has been such, a difficult thing right now, because there's so much mom guilt that I feel, whenever I'm away from him, and the time and dedication that it takes to get to the level that I need to dance with American Ballet Theater. I mean, that's going to be really difficult to really take the time to step away, on top of all the other jobs I have. So it's getting back in the studio. It's taking an hour and a half ballet class every morning, a slow progression of doing that consistently, every 5 days a week straight. And then eventually, starting personal training and getting coaching on certain roles just to build the stamina back up. to be able to go on stage. So that could be 4 to 5 hours, probably in the beginning, working up to 8-hour rehearsal days, which is the norm at American Ballet Theater, gearing up for a performance.
And so do you worry about, you've talked about you say you have a new body, and do you worry about that? And if you do, how do you manage that concern?
I don't worry about it. I'm excited. At this point in my life, like, I understand how my body works, and how our bodies are going to, continue to change throughout our lives. I think back to being 19 years old at ABT, and going through puberty, at a late age, but going through puberty, and being able to step back and say, that's my old body, and what am I going to do with this new body that I'm in, and how am I going to make it its best self, and be able to separate, not looking back and trying to be that old person. So there's going to be so many beautiful discoveries. There's going to be things that I'm going to have to let go of, that I'm just like, I used to be able to do that like this, and I can't now after a baby. But I'm looking forward to discovering new challenges and things that I couldn't do before, that maybe I can do better now.
Another audience member wants to know what advice you pass along to young aspiring dancers.
Yeah, I think it's important to stay focused on your path, that you will never be like anyone else. It's as Prince has told me, that it's so powerful to be a unique individual, and not to compare yourself to other people, because it only takes away from your experience and from your focus.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, we talked earlier about what ballet gave you, and the power that it showed you possessed, and so on. Both you and Raven basically have changed the dance world forever. The role that you have, being first, always changes things. Mm-hmm. It's never quite the same again. And I wonder if you had to characterize what you've brought to the dance world. Like, what would you say you, Misty Copeland, have brought to it?
I would say that I've brought it to more people, that I've maybe allowed for people to feel that it's something that they can do, that it's not this far away elite thing that doesn't connect with everyday people. And I feel like by sharing my story, by expressing that, I didn't come from this typical upbringing of a classical dancer that comes from money, or comes from a certain status in society, that I think it's allowed for more people to feel like it's for them.
Another audience member is wondering if there is a funny or surprising story about Raven that you want to share.
Raven, in general, like, she had such a racy sense of humor. And she was naughty. She was naughty. Like, she would kind of turn stories into being like really sexual in ways that you were like, Raven, where is this coming from? But she was such a big flirt, and she would flirt with my husband before we were married, so much. She was just not at all the way she appears, as this sweet old lady with her swept updo in a bun and her long dresses. She had an incredible sense of humor.
The Commonwealth Club, it has a tradition. I should invite, if there are any final questions, you should get them in now, because we just have about 5 more minutes left. But they do like to ask their guests this question, which is, what is your 60-second idea to change the world? So what is your 60-second idea to change the world?
Wow, this is a lot of pressure. I really think that it's just continuing on what I'm doing. I think to be able to introduce as many people to art and to dance can change the world. It can change their lives, whether it's through the endorsement deals that I have and getting ballet out there to a mass audience, or through a program that I have through my foundation called Be Bold, where it's an after school ballet program that's bringing free ballet classes to under-resourced, underrepresented, underprivileged communities to be able to give them the tools to be leaders in their communities.
Yeah. If you didn't dance, what would you do? What do you think would be something that would be what Misty Copeland does in the next chapter, of her life?
Well, I mean, because dance is a part of my life and has been, since I was 13, and it means so much to me. Moving forward, even if I wasn't dancing, I will be connected to ballet in some way, getting the message out there, speaking about it, being an advocate for it. But, if I hadn't ever found dance, I would have been a part of something artistic, but I'm really just drawn to cooking and food. And I often say maybe I would be a chef.
You have often described yourself as a bunhead. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. It was a bunhead move to be watching that documentary, The Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, on like a Saturday night when I'm like in my 20s. It's like a ballet nerd. It's someone who's really dedicated, and they call them bunheads because, the ballerinas that are, even when they're off, their hair is slicked back tight in a bun, either up on their head or at the nape of their neck. And you see them walking around with their turned out toes, and you can spot a bun head a mile away.
And that is the sort of the inspiration of your children's book as well, right?
Yes. I've always thought, yes, it has this kind of negative connotation, and I feel like I've tried to turn it into something positive, and that it's like this amazing club that kids should want to be a part of. And so through my children's book, Bunheads, it's like this kind of secret society. It's all of these eclectic group of kids that find this commonality through the beauty of ballet. And it's like their own little club.
Yes. And children's books is something that you love to do. You really like to make yourself as accessible as possible to the rest of the world, which is so important when ballet can feel really closed off. It's also the work of your foundation. You've mentioned it several times, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to share sort of what is it that you would like to do with that moving forward.
Yeah. Through the Misty Copeland Foundation, it's an opportunity to truly, it's not just, there have been so many diversity initiatives that I've championed or I've been a part of, but it's really not just about creating a diversity initiative, but really finding programs and ways to bring ballet to more people and to bring more awareness, to have spaces where we can have open dialogue and conversations about ways that we can improve the ballet world. But I'm just so proud again of this first program, the Be Bold program, which stands for Ballet Explorations. Ballet offers leadership development. And I think it's really self-explanatory that this is not just about exposing children to the arts and exposing them to ballet, getting them into a ballet class, but it's not about creating the next Raven Wilkinson or Misty Copeland necessarily. We would love that to happen, but it's really giving these young people the tools to be able to be successful in their lives and again, to be leaders in their communities.
Well, we do have one more question that snuck in here. You mentioned you love food. Is there a dish that is your specialty, best meal or restaurant?
I'm really excited. Ina Garten has a new show. I think it's called Be Our Guest, I believe it's called. She's one of my favorite chefs, Ina Garten. But the Barefoot Contessa, people don't know her name that way. I recently was on her show and made one of my favorite dishes for her. And it's a broiled salmon with a marinade that I make myself with. It's like a citrus salmon. So it's like orange juice and soy sauce and scallions. What else is in it? It's a bright, beautiful dish, and then with like a sweet potato mash underneath it. So simple and tasty.
It's so something, another move, another book for you, Misty. Lord, I wouldn't be surprised. So, one of the things that I never I realized I didn't ask you about was the moment that you actually first met Raven Wilkinson, if you want to share that story.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really amazing. Again, just when I found out about her and her story, I used every opportunity, every interview I would talk about Raven. My manager, Gilda Squire, she was like, "Who is this woman?" And she looked her up and ended up coming up with the idea to have a conversation at the Studio Museum in Harlem and have a conversation between two generations of Black ballerinas. So it was there at the Studio Museum in Harlem that we met for the first time, seconds before we went on stage and had our first conversation in front of an audience. And I met her backstage, and I bawled my eyes out. I was stunned to see that we were the same height. She was this petite, soft-spoken, beautiful woman, and we just embraced and held hands as we walked to the stage. And I feel like we never really let go from that day on.
Yeah, there's something about, we talked earlier about you being a bunhead, and there's something about being able to place yourself in history, right? Being able to place yourself in something of the past that actually, as you were saying, makes you realize you do belong somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do feel like for people who've always had representation, that can be a really hard thing to explain.
Right. You just said it very well. that it can be really difficult if that's all you know. All you know is seeing yourself represented, and it was just like this. It was a shock to me, and also like a missing piece. When I met Raven, it was like, oh, like, the reason that my body feels so natural and I become the person I'm supposed to be when I'm on the stage is because I am supposed to be part of this. And Raven, learning of her contributions and her history in this art form just validated that.
You've talked about how you've been able to translate the power that you feel when you're on the stage now to the times when you are off the stage. Mm-hmm. Is there something that you do to be able to do that when you're confronting moments when you're feeling vulnerable?
Yeah. I've always felt that, it was difficult for me to accept that my voice was important or needed to be heard when I was using it verbally, through my voice. It always felt that I'm supposed to be on stage. I'm supposed to use my body to express myself, but it was always hard for me to really feel that my voice was important. And so, it's taken time. But, the way that I use my voice, whether it's speaking up about certain situations of racism or discrimination, in championing other Black and Brown people in this art form, I've become a different person by understanding the importance of not just being representation on the stage, but also off the stage.
Well, Missy, thank you so much for telling your story and Raven's story and
thank you
for the impact that both of you have had. Misty Copeland's new book is The Wind at My Back, Resilience, Grace, and Other Gifts from my mentor, Raven Wilkinson. I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of Misty's book at your local bookstore. And also my thanks to the Applied Materials Foundation and all of you for joining us. If you would like to learn more about upcoming in-person and virtual Commonwealth Club events, please visit www.commonwealthclub.org/events. Thank you again, Misty. It's been such a pleasure to meet you and talk with you. I know I mentioned earlier that also my daughters are such huge fans of yours. But yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm Nina Kim. Take care.